How one woman lost 170 pounds and found a new life. I was 330 pounds. After going to college, having a baby, and starting a business, I found myself at 330 pounds and feeling like I had very little time to focus on anything other than work and my family. Around this time, my mother delivered an obnoxious nagging session about how I should take advantage of the new 24-hour gym around the corner. So I went. That's when I stepped on the scale and felt very confused by the number that greeted me. What do you mean 328 pounds? I began working out 7 days a week, burning tons of calories at every session. I never skipped a day, but even after 6 months, I hadn't lost the amount of weight I thought I should have dropped, so I gave up. Without fail, I gained 10 pounds in 3 months. I had to have been doing something very wrong to be gaining weight that quickly. At that time, I had my epiphany. Epiphany. It had to be what I was eating. I thought about how I had eaten to fuel those super workouts, and even worse, what I ate afterward. I thought I was doing myself a favor by going to Taco Bell and only getting the nachos with chicken instead 7 or 8 tacos. I thought I was doing a good thing by only grabbing the taquitos with sour cream and sour sour cream and salsa for a post-workout meal. In other words, I countered each of my workout successes with the most ridiculous eating habits ever. But why did I do this? That's when I looked very closely at what I ate and why I ate it. I wasn't always eating merely because I was hungry, and I wasn't only eating it because it was around. A dear friend suggested that I read "The End of Overeating" by David Kessler, and it introduced me to the cold hard truth. I had gained so much weight because I was an emotional eater. I realized that so much of what I ate throughout the day was determined by how I felt. I was unhappy with how my life was going, and I was creating my own little carnival with food, something that obviously affected my health. Not only was I morbidly obese, but I had high blood pressure to a point where my ankles and calves swelled and caused pitting edema in my lower limbs. I threw out everything that was high in sugar, which meant that most, if not all, processed food had to go. I learned how to read labels, at which point I realized that just about everything had sugar in it. I became hypersensitive to messages in advertising that encouraged me to eat in order to feel better. I learned to cook my favorite recipes with far less sugar, fat, and salt. In fact, I learned to appreciate foods that use sugars, fats, and salt in a more minimalist fashion, optimizing a recipe for the best taste as opposed to what would make me feel the best. Instead of turning to food to make me feel better, I started looking at new ways to manage my stress. I started to practice yoga at home. I looked forward to walks as personal time to sort out my brain and think more clearly without interruption. And before I knew it, my walking turned into running. The weight began flying off. Eating better, combined with simplified workouts, sometimes just walking for a half hour a day, caused so much weight loss that I had difficulty keeping track of it all. Now, life is completely different. I lift weights, I take my daughter and my husband on little big dates where we go out and do things instead of eat. And those early activities, such as yoga and running, still have a special place in my heart. I listen to Dr. Kessler's book each year so I can recalibrate my thinking and ensure that I don't slip back into my old habits. Because I developed these healthy routines, I found myself losing a total of about 170 pounds to date, and I'll keep training because this is who I am now. This is a part of me, and I and my family are so thankful for it. Kidnapped survivor Michelle Knight begged Ariel Castro not to abduct others. Michelle Knight, one of the three Cleveland women who survived a decade of imprisonment and torture, begged kidnapper Ariel Castro not to abduct other women. She told Dr. Phil McGraw in an interview that aired its first part today. Knight remembered Castro telling her that he would let her go after he got two other girls. "No, you don't need to do that," Knight recalled telling Castro. "I begged him not to bring any more there to suffer the hell I went through." Knight described being abducted by Castro on a day when she was going to an appointment about custody of her 2-year-old son that had been taken away after being attacked by her mother's boyfriend. Castro offered her a ride when he found her asking for directions at a Cleveland dollar store just blocks from her home. Castro got Knight into his house by telling her he would give her a puppy for her son. She got nervous when she got into the house and didn't see or hear puppies. Before she knew it, Castro had tied her up on a wall sideways, like an ornament. She was eventually taken to the basement where a large rusty chain was used to tie her body and neck to a pole. I was shocked. "The only thing I can do is cry, begging him let me go back to my son," she said. "Please don't do this to me," and he said he can't take me back, and then he threw money at me. He was obsessed with prostitutes, and also he thought I was a 13-year-old prostitute, Knight said. When he found out my real age, he got mad. She was 21 years old at the time. Knight described a hellish torture in the first few months when she was Castro's lone victim. She was repeatedly punched, whipped, and raped. In her first winter she had only a single sheet and no clothes to keep her warm. In the unheated house that was so cold her lips would turn blue and she could see her breast. At Christmas, Castro taunted her by saying her son was spending the holiday with someone else. In those first months, she was once able to pick the lock on her chains and ran to escape when she heard him returning. She was so terrified of him that I'm halfway out the window and I ran back in and chained myself as best I could. That's the last time I had a chance to get out, she said. Knight said that when was first pregnant by Castro, he punched her in the stomach with a barbell to abort the fetus. Knight said she did not think she was the first girl that Castro had done this to. He raped and beat her countless times, and she said he had a fetish for choking. She recalled Castro constantly watching a television show about people who had really bad sexual problems, and then wanting to recreate all the sceneries with her. "I hated him," she said. "I told him that he was a monster." Knight said it was the thought of her son's face and his voice telling her not to give up that kept her alive. "I want my son to know me as a victor, not a victim," she said, "and I wanted him to know that I survived loving him. His love got me through." 8 months after abducting Knight, Castro kidnapped then 16-year-old Amanda Berry. Knight said she found out Berry by seeing reports on the news that she had disappeared. Castro had put a broken-down TV in Knight's room. A few weeks later, she said Castro brought a girl into her room and introduced her as his brother's girlfriend. The girl smiled at her and was wearing pajamas. Knight recalled being embarrassed because she only had a sheet around her. Knight said she knew it was Berry. "She smiled at me because I think she was happy to see there was another person there," Knight said. "She looked like she wanted to cry, though, but she didn't." Knight's room was full of garbage, knee-high, with spoiled food that Castro refused to take out and flies flying around the room. She said it was months before she saw Berry again. They eventually told each other that they recognized one another from school. Knight said they were kept apart and never allowed to be left alone together. "If her mom was on TV, I would blast my TV so she can turn on hers, and then I'd quickly turn it down," she said, for fear of being punished. Knight estimated she saw Berry 6 or 7 times over the course of a year. "Sometimes she will cry and I'll tell her everything will be okay and one day we'll get home," Knight said. "We just have to wait it out." Knight is the first of the 3 women to publicly tell her story with a 2-part appearance on Dr. Phil's show, which will air on Tuesday and Wednesday. Berry, 27, and Gina DeJesus, 23, announced a book contract in October, but Knight, 32, declined to be part of the deal. Castro pleaded guilty to 937 counts of rape, kidnapping, torture, and aggravated murder, and was sentenced to life in prison without parole plus 1,000 years by an Ohio judge on August 1st. He was found dead in his jail cell on September 3rd. Hopes for a strong 2015 climate deal fade as risks grow. World governments are likely to recoil from plans for an ambitious 2015 climate change deal at talks next week. Concern over economic growth at least partially eclipsing scientists' warnings of rising temperatures and water levels. "We are in the eye of a storm," said Evil D. Boyer, United Nations climate chief in 2009 when a summit in Copenhagen ended without agreement. After Copenhagen, nations targeted a 2015 deal to enter into force from 2020 with the goal of averting more floods, heat waves, droughts, and rising sea levels. The outline of a more modest 2015 deal, to be discussed at annual UN climate talks in Warsaw on November 11th to 22nd, is emerging that will not halt a creeping rise in temperatures but might be a guide for tougher measures in later years. Since 2009, scientists' warnings have become more strident and new factors have emerged, sometimes dampening the impact of their message that human activity is driving warming. The U.S. shale boom helped push U.S. carbon emissions to an 18-year low last year, for instance, but it also shifted cheap coal into Europe when it was used in power stations. Despite repeated promises to tackle the problem, developed nations have been preoccupied with spurring sluggish growth, and recession has itself braked emissions from factories, power plants, and cars, a phenomenon that may prove short-lived. Emerging economies such as China and India, heavily reliant on cheap, high-polluting coal to end poverty, are reluctant to take the lead despite rising emissions and pollution that are choking cities. Our concern is urgency in tackling climate change, said Marlene Moses of Nauru, chair of the Alliance of Small Island States, whose members fear they will be swamped by rising sea levels. Vague promises will no longer suffice. She wants progress when senior officials and environment ministers from almost 200 nations meet in Warsaw to discuss the 2015 deal, as well as climate aid to poor nations, and ways to compensate them for loss and damage from global warming. Yet, many governments, especially in Europe, are concerned that climate policies, such as generous support schemes for solar energy, push up consumer energy bills. Some want to emulate the success of the United States in bringing down energy prices via shale gas, a fossil fuel that can help cut greenhouse emissions if it replaces coal, but at the same time can divert investment from cleaner energy. Patchwork of pledges. Many Warsaw delegates say the 2015 accord looks likely to be a patchwork of national pledges for curbing greenhouse gas emissions, anchored in domestic legislation after Copenhagen failed to agree a sweeping treaty built on international law. The less ambitious model is a shift from the existing Kyoto Protocol, agreed in 1997, that set a central target for emissions cuts by industrialized countries and then shared them out among about 40 nations. But Kyoto has not worked well, partly because the United States did not join, objecting that the treaty would cost U.S. jobs and set no targets for big emerging nations. Russia, Canada, and Japan have since dropped out. Warsaw will be the first meeting since the UN's Panel of Climate Scientists, the main guide of government action, in September raised the probability that climate change is mainly man-made to 95% from 90, and said that substantial and sustained cuts in emissions were needed. Treaty, a leaked draft of a second report by the panel, due in March 2014, suggests climate change will cause heat waves, droughts, disrupt crop growth, aggravate poverty, and expose hundreds of millions of people to coastal floods as seas rise. Evidence is accumulating weekly, monthly as to how dangerous this will be, said Andrew Steer, head of the World Resources Institute think tank in Washington. Every year of delay added $500 million to the cost of fixing climate change. He said there were signs of progress, such as a plan in June by U.S. President Barack Obama to achieve a goal for cutting emissions by 2020 and the start of carbon trading in China. But they don't add up to a solution, Steer added. Any deal weaker than a treaty for shifting from fossil fuels to renewable energies is anathema to poor nations. The 2015 deal is unlikely to include deep enough emissions cuts to achieve a UN goal set in 2010 of limiting temperature rise to below 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 Fahrenheit. Temperatures have already risen by 2.8 Celsius, 1.4 Fahrenheit, since the Industrial Revolution and are on track to cause more heat waves, floods, and rising sea levels despite a hiatus in the pace of warming at the Earth's surface so far this century. A more flexible approach for 2015 championed by the United States raises risks that many nations will simply set themselves weak goals, hoping others will take up the slack, but it may have a better chance of ratification by national parliaments. The idea is that negotiators will find a way to compare the ambition of promises and develop a mechanism to ratchet the weak ones up in coming years. India counts down to launch of mission to Mars. India is counting down to the launch of its first journey to Mars, a complex mission that it hopes will demonstrate and advance technologies for space travel. Mangalyaan, which means Mars craft in Hindi, will ride a powerful rocket first into an elliptical orbit around Earth. There it will perform a series of technical maneuvers, a short burns to raise its orbit before it slingshot toward Mars. The 350 kilogram, 3,000 pound orbiter orbiter must travel some 780 million kilometers (485 million miles) over 300 days to reach the Red Planet next September. India is aiming to follow the Soviet Union, United States, and Europe in having a successful visit to Mars. The biggest challenge will be precisely navigating the spacecraft to Mars, said K. Radhakrishnan, chairman of the Indian Space and Research Organization. The space agency will host a live webcast of Tuesday's launch from East Coast island of Sriharikota. Radhakrishnan and his wife offered prayers Tuesday morning at a 200-year-old shrine to the Hindu god Vishnu, asking for success in the launch. India defends its $1 billion space program against naysayers, who argue the money would be better spent stamping out widespread poverty and hunger by noting its importance in providing high-tech jobs for scientists and engineers and practical applications for solving problems on Earth. Space research over decades has allowed India to develop satellite communications and remote sensing technologies that are helping to solve everyday problems, from forecasting where fish can be caught to predicting cataclysmic storms and floods. Mangla's stolen motorcycle found after 46 years. Donald Devolt wonders what kind of memories his Triumph motorcycle helped make in the 46 years since it was stolen, and he's looking forward to making more of his own when it's returned. The 73-year-old Omaha man learned last week that California authorities had recovered his 1953 Triumph Tiger 100 at the Port of Los Angeles. The bike was about to be shipped to Japan when U.S. Customs and Borders Protection agents who checked the vehicle identification number discovered the motorcycle had been reported stolen in February 1967. Devolt said he is eager to get the bike back, but he thinks investigators may be even more excited than him about the motorcycle's recovery. Devolt had the bike for only a year or two when it was taken from his fenced backyard. "I really want to protect it this time," Devolt said. "I'm sure there's people out there that will want to take it away." The bike was vaulted at $300 when in 1967. The shipping documents listed its value today at $9,000. Devolt already has a Harley Davidson and Kawasaki motorcycle in his garage, so he plans to reserve the Triumph for special rides. Devolt said he's talked about the motorcycle over the years. Whenever he was around bikers, it had a couple features unusual for Triumphs made in early 1950s, such as his hardtail frame. Devolt records Marlon Brando riding a similar Triumph bike in the movie The Wild One, and after that it seemed like everyone wanted to ride a motorcycle. But Devolt said he was already riding motorcycles by the time the movie came out, and continued riding for much of his life. What sold him on the Triumph was the blue color and the name "Real Blue Bitch" airbrushed on the side of the gas tank. A friend with a trucking company is helping Devote arrange to ship the motorcycle home from California. Once he gets it back in a couple weeks, Devote plans to have someone restore the bike's name